Welcome back on board the Aerosoft DC-8-50. I've already uploaded one video which was showed me a taxi in the aircraft and a takeoff at St Martin in the initial climb out. So the aim of this video is we are cold and dark. We're going to go through absolutely everything that it takes to get the aircraft from cold and dark to airborne, up in the sky, and flying on a proper departure. So the aircraft does come with some documentation, and the documentation that I'm going to be following is this, which is the expanded checklist. So it's the checklist, but it gives you like a little bit more information about each point. And the reason that I'm using this is because this is only my third flight in this plane. And yeah, I do need some extra information to help me fly the thing. Some of the points that I've noticed before, like some of them you don't really need to do, just like from the level of the simulation, and there's also some stuff missing off here. So I've got this printed off and crossed a few bits off and added a few bits on, so if you follow along, not all of it's going to match up exactly. So let's get inside the cockpit. So we've loaded it up, we're cold and dark. I think the first thing I'm going to do is connect the jet bridge. And over on the flight engineers panel, I'm going to flip the battery switch up to battery. The first thing, as you do on the checklist, is set the windshield switches to warm up. So we'll do that. We'll set the emergency exit light switch. And it has been a couple of weeks since I've flown this aircraft as well, so I can't remember exactly where everything is. There's a disarm check on the emergency exit lights, and then we set them to disarm. I'm going to connect the external power now, and things like the external power, if you have a look in the manual, it tells you that like those things are connected to the controls for like tail hook and stuff like that in P3D. So for me it's Control W, and then if we switch over to the engineers panel, and switch the battery switch down to external power, because it's lit up now saying that external power is available. And there we go, we have external power. That is the sort of initial stage of getting the aircraft ready to go. So we'll run through the checks here. The radio rack switches are normal. Blast heaters on. Now we're supposed to check every single one of these things. I'm not going to do that. The generator control switches are all on. Bus power switches are all on. These are the light switches. Have that on or off. Probably have it like that, looks a bit better. These all look okay, the pneumatics are off. cabin compressors are off, the Freon compressors are off, which is the air conditioning. Now we need to set the cabin pressurization control. So in this aircraft you need to turn the dial to whatever cabin pressurization it's going to be. And just to illustrate, our initial climb level is flight level 320, which you can see on the flight plan. So on this dial, I dial the right hand dial around to 320 or 32 it will be on the inner scale. And then the outer scale is the cabin altitude that it'll aim for. So the pressurization will aim, if we are at flight level 320, it'll aim to have pressurization of just under 4,000 feet. And we need to set the barometric altitude, and that is 2994. Whoops, where are we? There we are. We can press this yellow handle and it'll get rid of the yoke. Just while we do this. 2994 is set. Cockpit temperature control as desired. Let's cool it down a bit. Current cabin temperature is 85 degrees and this is Fahrenheit. So that is probably about 30 degrees C. And we don't have any means of cooling the cabin down because there's no APU. We can connect an external air source, but it's really noisy, so I'm not going to do that at the minute. The passengers will just have to boil when they first get on, which they're not on yet. So next page of the checks, the Freon compressors we've already checked are off. The fire warning tests I'm not going to do because it takes a little bit of time. Galley power. I'll switch that on. Spoiler test switches, I'm not going to do that. The flight spoiler switch is in normal, so that's good. And hydraulic system pressure is 0, which is correct. And the auxiliary hydraulic pump is off. Hydraulic quantity is in normal. We can test the auxiliary hydraulic pump by flipping the switch up for a second. We then get pressurization. We'll flick that back off. Brake pressure on the forward panel. We've got hydraulic and air brake pressure, and those are both looking correct to me. The engine oil quantity is good. That is the test system for the engine vibration. And that looks correct. The oil cooler doors we need to switch to auto. Oops, that's an upward flick of the mouse wheel to get that up. There is a test for this system, but that's pretty superfluous. Tail de-icing systems are not simulated, although the other de-icing systems are, and they're pretty good. The fuel system has caused me a couple of hiccups and engine failures, so I'm going to check this. The main fuel selectors are to main, the aux, the aux fuel tank selectors are off. The fuel crossfeed valves are not simulated, unfortunately. The fuel boost pump switches and everything is all off, and the fill switches are off. We haven't actually loaded any fuel in the aircraft. We can do that now actually. I think I will request GSX catering service. LSG do that, and then I'll request the GSX fueling service, and then when the fuel truck comes we can fill up the fuel tanks to the level on the flight plan. Realised I had another window sat on top of the video the whole time, my bad. Then the next check is for fuel quantity, which we haven't got yet. You can have a look at the passenger and payload loader. I'll shift that out of the way. So on the flight plan, I just take it down to the loader, and it says an estimated passenger load of 112, and it gives us total payload of 25,800 pounds, and it gives us a 0 fuel weight. So I'm going to dial up the passenger loader here. It doesn't let you select the exact number, so I can have 38 or 57 passengers, but to be honest, it's I think it's perfectly acceptable for what it does. So we've got 114 passengers. I'll just take the fuel out. We should have a 0 fuel weight of 164, so we've got 156. So let's add in some suitcases, and then we've got 164. So now we've got the aircraft loaded up as it should be. Catering on this plane, you can open up the third door and have a catering truck go in, but I haven't set it up like that for now. I've just got a little LSG van to pull up, so that's something that I need to set up. So that is the aircraft basically considered catered. The next thing to come will be the fuel truck. I might as well go into the flight plan while we're here, so we can have a quick look at the flight plan. So we're flying from San Diego to Pago, which is in American Samoa. The 4-letter code is NSTU, and the alternate is in Western Samoa, so not too far for that. They're both international airports. And this is pretty much the sort of route that the DC-8 was designed for, these long sort of long flights, and it's good because there's not too many waypoints, so when we tune in the INS it won't take us too long to program that in, hopefully. Okay, so now we're onto the pre-start section of the pre-flight checks. So cockpit lights, as required. Select them on there. That's normally pretty good. The next thing is to do the INS. So INS takes a good while to set up. We start the procedure for the INS by looking on the overhead panel, and we pull this knob out, we turn it right, and we click it back in on standby, and we do the same the one on the other side. So we've got two INS units and we've just selected them both to standby. First thing that we do, we need to tell it the location of the aircraft, which is on, I find a clearer view, this dial here. We set that on position, and it's already pre-filled with the aircraft's position. So I'm going to set remote, and this means that when I enter something in this one, it also enters it in the other one, and vice versa. We just got the alert there to start filling the tanks of the aircraft. So on the flight plan, I can just pick that display back on for a second. It calls for a block fuel of 140,924 pounds, and everything in this aircraft is in pounds. So elect 140,000 pounds of fuel. $141, and that gives us a gross weight of 304,600. And on the flight plan, it estimates the takeoff weight will be 302,900. And it says we're going to burn £2,000 for taxi, so that adds up pretty much perfect. That is the aircraft basically fueled now, and we can switch out to the engineer's panel and double check that we've got 141,000 pounds of fuel. We've got pretty much that, so that's fine by me. Alright, so we were loading in the position. So our current position, you can do Shift and Z and it will tell you your present position at the top. But it's a nice little feature that it's already sort of preloaded in, so you don't have to bring up that other window. So I'm going to enter the present position, which is north. So that's this one has got an N on it, so that's north, south, east and west. So I start by entering north, 32440, enter, and I'm going to do west 117122. So west 117122, and that's the position entered. I am going to do it on this one as well because I'm on remote, but I'm not 100% sure that it works when you're on the position dial, so let's just do that ourselves. North 32440, insert west 17. Okay, so I made a mistake, so you just press clear, and then I can go back to west 11712. No, what have I done? West 1 1. No, I've done something wrong. Yeah, let's try it again. North 32440, insert west 11712. That basically tells the aircraft where it's at, and once we've entered the present position on both sides, then we can go back up to the controls on the top pull it out, turn it round and stick it in a line. Pull it out, turn it round, stick it in a line, and that sets the gyros and everything spinning. This knob here is the desired track and status. We can stick it on there. So we don't have the desired track would be on the left, but since we haven't entered any route information in, there's nothing in there. And the status is this on the right, and that gives us any faults with the unit, and it tells us whether the unit is ready for navigation. So the navigation accuracy at the minute is 9, which is the lowest accuracy, and that basically means when you're on the ground it's not usable. So as the gyros spin and the unit aligns, then we will that number will gradually reduce, hopefully down to 0. When that reduces down to 0, that means we've got good accuracy. And then the dials on the top, we can dial up, dial around to nav, and that's when we can actually use the thing to navigate. There's no GPS on this aircraft. We're going to navigate using the INS. I did make a mistake on the flight plan, which was to let SimBrief choose the departure, and it chose us to go on the Momoto 2 departure. The only problem with that, if I move the departure over to this screen, the Momoto 2 is an RNAV departure. Where has it gone? There it is. This is an RNAV departure, and since we don't have GPS, we only have INS, we're not accurate enough to fly an RNAV departure, so we can't actually do that. So what the departure would have done, and we've got westerly winds, we would have flown out up here through Momoto and then to Santa Catalina and then down to Mallet. So what we're going to do instead, we're going to choose a different departure. Probably this one, the Pebble 6, a westward departure, and that still goes to Santa Catalina, but this is not an RNAV departure, this is flown using VORs. When we get to it, that's what we're going to do. Remove these charts because these were off the previous flight. That was the localizer arrival, which I screwed up quite badly. We'll go for the Pebble 6. Okay, so back to it. The next thing that we need to do with the INS is enter the route. So the unit holds up to 9 waypoints. At the minute this is selected on waypoint 0. Use my mouse wheel and select waypoint 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. These are the coordinates for each of those waypoints, and at the minute they're all blank. So I need to start entering some route information. So I've printed off the route from the flight plan. If I just bring up that screen again, a bit bigger. So Santa Catalina appears on there, and I think we're going to make that our first waypoint. So we need to give each of these waypoints a number. So on my printed off copy, I'm going to go down to Santa Catalina, and I'm just going to make that waypoint 1. Mallet can be waypoint 2. Rosen, waypoint 3. Then you've got your top of climb and your crossing into the oceanic airspace. So then Ficky can be waypoint 4. Lena, waypoint 5. And then over the page, this top one here, I'm going to make that one waypoint 6. And we won't enter in any more coordinates than that because it takes a while, and it's probably not very exciting to watch as if the rest of this stream is. So we turn the knob round to waypoint. It's got waypoint 1, so now I'm gonna hopefully you'll be able to see this. Yeah, hopefully that's a decent. So Santa Catalina is going to be waypoint 1. So I'm going to enter in the coordinates for that. So that one is north 33, 22.5, insert, and west 118, 25.2, insert. And I'm going to turn this around to waypoint 2. Yeah, that's better. So waypoint 2, which is going to be Mallet, and that coordinate is north 32, 28.5, and west 119, 35.5. Waypoint 3 is Rosin, and these are the coordinates that we get on SimBrief, and this is what I'm entering. This one is north 31, 56.5, and west 120, 16.1. Waypoint 4 was Ficky, which is north 31, 33.5, and west 121 to 3.5. Waypoint 5 was Lena, which is north 30, 1.5, and west 122, 9.7. Waypoint 6 is over the page, and it's north 25, west 130. That one I entered north 25, 000, and west 130, 000. And that's as far as I'm going to take it for now. We can enter up the rest of those while we're in flight. And we can verify all of these waypoints to make sure we haven't screwed up and entered the wrong coordinates. So we turn the knob around to distance and time, and it'll tell us if we select waypoint change. We tell it waypoint 1 to 2, and it says that there are 80 miles between those two waypoints. So hopefully that'll be correct. There it is. So 1 to 2 is going from Santa Catalina to Mallet, and it tells you on Mallet 80. We've got flight level Mora, which I forget what that is, and then distance 80. So that one's correct, and then we just press 3, and that one's the distance from 2 to 3 or from 3 to 2. And that one is 47 on the INS, and it's 47 on there. So we're just going to continue to do that. Number 4 is 62 miles, which is correct because we're going from Rosin to Ficky, but we've got the top of climb and the FIR in between. The distance is 27 plus 35, which I'll make to be 62. And then the distance from the oceanic FIR to Ficky is 0 miles, so it's just that plus that, which is 62, which is correct. Then going to number 5 is 103. Because 103 is correct at Lena. And then to number 6 is 498 miles. Which again, that one's correct. And that's the first oceanic point taking us right out into the ocean. These are the distances that I've been referring to, which are shown under distance on here. That's the final one there, 498 miles. So let's have a look back round to the status and see how we're doing. So that 9 has reduced down to 4 now. So 4 is actually at a level where we could use that for navigation. So if we look at the overhead panel, the lights have both come on saying that it's ready nav. We're going to leave it, we're going to let it reduce right down to 0 so that we've got a more accurate navigation. Continuing with the pre-start checks then, so we've got the INS pretty much set up. We've got the radio switch is set to radio. We can put the transponder onto standby and turn the nav radios on. This switch here is the INS radio switch, so at the minute it's means that the aircraft will take its navigation from the radio beacons, which is what we're going to use on the departure. Once we're past Santa Catalina, we'll flick that over to INS, and then we'll let the INS take over. So engine anti-ice switches is next on the checks, and Ito is off. Engine switches and the scoops are off. On the engineer's panel, the timer switch is set to off, and we've got 2 different timers that we can use, but at the minute we're using neither. That's the emergency exit lights. Now that we're on external power, they can be armed. Oops, that's the emergency exit lights armed. We've got a warning that the pitot heater is in up. That is supposed to be off at the minute. Seatbelt signs and no smoking switch. Well, we can have the nav lights on. Seatbelt sign is on, and we can have the no smoking switch on as well. Continuous ignition and ignition override are off, and the starter switch is off. And the wing flood, retractable lights, taxi lights, and everything is all off. The anti-skid switch is hidden, so it's underneath here, and that is off. You can't normally see that. So we go back up in the seat, and the anti-skid light is on, which is correct. The parking brakes are set. This knob thing is pulled out, which you can tell because it's got this sort of grey thing around it. When we take the parking brakes off, that'll press in. The rain removal is off. There are no windscreen wipers on this plane. It's just a jet of hot air which blows up onto the window, clears the windscreen, and those are the levers for that. A couple of things that are not simulated. Then we've got the airspeed warning switch. Where is that again? That's one of the things that I can't remember where it's at. probably come back to that. It's going to be a long flight, so we've got plenty of time to find that. It's not important for this simulation, but it's one of the things that I like to press because it makes a noise. So the oil pressure lights are on. The landing gear handle is down. We've got 3 greens. We can check that it's unsafe by flicking that switch, and we've got 3 reds there, so that's fine. The fuel shut-off levers are all off, so these are pretty much like you would expect on a Boeing aircraft. The autopilot yaw damper, where are we? There we are. The autopilot is just ridiculous in this aircraft. It's so basic, so it can be either off, yaw damper, or autopilot. And it has some like really basic modes, and that's one of the things that makes the plane hard to fly. And that's all fine for now. The wing flaps, the handle is up, but they are down about 7 or 8 degrees, and I think that's because we don't have any hydraulic pressure. So yeah, you can see there that the wing flaps are partially down. We can check things like the rudder trim, but since it was me that flew the aircraft last, I know that that's all fine. The outside air temperature is about 30 degrees, and it does say determine that for takeoff. So the next thing that we need to do is get all of our takeoff data. One of the things that you get in the documentation is performance.pdf, and it's just a huge series of numbers. There's no computer to work anything out for you, so you basically have to work out all of your performance data for yourself. So we're going to work out our takeoff data now. I'm going to make a note of these on a piece of paper as we go. So let's say that the outside air temperature is 30 degrees. First thing we'll get is our V1 rotate and V2 speeds. Actually, we'll get the maximum power for takeoff, so this gives us our EPR. So it's not N1 on this aircraft, it's EPR. Our altitude is sea level, so we go along here, and the outside air temperature is degrees Celsius, and the outside air temperature is 30 degrees Celsius. So at sea level we should be 1.86 EPR, and I'll write that down, 1.86 EPR. I'll also make a note of the climb thrust, and I'll take note of the climb thrust from 6,000 to 30,000. In 30 degrees that is going to be 1.58. So climb 1.58, just so we know what to reduce it to after we take off. And that's the same at the 2,000 feet and the 5,000 feet mark. We would have to reduce it if we were using the de-icer or the rain removal on the windscreen, because that's taking power from the engines. So takeoff speeds, this is the ambient temperature chart. So the altitude we take as 0 to 1,000 feet, so we're at sea level. Temperature 29 to 35 degrees Celsius. So we use this column of numbers here. This is the flap 15 chart. So I want to do a flap 25 chart since we're doing a long flight and we're going to be heavy, and I don't think the runway is that long here. So now we look for the weight. So what was our current weight again? I can't actually remember. So our takeoff weight was going to be 303,000 pounds. So let's take the 300 is probably the name. We can expect a V1 of 133 knots, V rotate of 147, and a V2 of 155 knots. So we can actually load those into the, well, load them in. I mean, it's a set of little notches, and you can just sort of pull them around with your mouse. But it works really well. It's a nice little thing to do. So I'm going to set my V1 at 133, and there we go. Our V rotate at 147. So I just grab hold of it and pull it to the right. 147 out there. V2 of 155. That's about there. And the other thing we can do is find out what the zero flat manoeuvring speed is. So at a weight of 300,000 pounds, it's 234. So that means basically that we retract the flaps to 0 once we hit 234. I'll write that down as well. VZF is 234 knots. That's what I'm going to set my last little notch to. So we know that that's where we have the flaps retracted at. That's pretty much the end of the pre-start checks. The only other thing that I'll add is notice the accuracy of the navigation has gone down to 0 now, which is pretty damn accurate. So now we can set both of the dials up here to nav. So they've stopped aligning, and now we can use the INS for navigation. And the performance doesn't really degrade while we're stationary on the ground, so that's fine. One other thing that I am going to set up is FS Captain, and it looks totally out of place to have an FMC on this aircraft. But this basically simulates having passengers on board the plane.
Good morning, Chief.
So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. This is probably going to be passed by PAX when it's released by TFDI, but this does me fine for the time being. I like to have passengers on board, and I like to get a score at the end of my flight. So I'm going to put some numbers in here now, and they're just going to come from the flight plan that we filed. So. The flight plan that we got from SimBrief rather. It has some data already filled in, what it guesses at, but it's not correct data. Payload it's already got. The fuel. It has an estimate of the fuel, but it's in kilos. So I need to convert that into pounds. So we've got 141,000 pounds. That's say 64,000 kilos of fuel. Flight number 3. And these are the times, these are the local times. And these are block times in locals, so our departure time is 11:05 local. That's our pushback time, and 16:56 is when we should be on the blocks in Samoa, in American Samoa. One really peculiar thing is that the clock in the DC-8 is always local time. So you can see that we're due off at 11:05 local, so we've basically got 15 minutes to get the passengers on and everything, so it's probably going to be a late departure, but it normally is in this aircraft because it takes a while to get set up. So let's request boarding from GSX. We'll commit to the flight in FS Captain. GSX boarding is underway. Boarding passengers now. Oh, and it wants the exit open. Yeah, for some reason GSX wants exit 2 opened, which is this one down here. I have no idea why. You can also open the cargo doors, which on my setup is Control and C, so we should probably do that. There we go, so we've got the cargo doors open in there. Let's tune in the departure then. I remember to right, so this is the departure that we're going to go for, and it is the Pebble 6 departure. We're going to take off to the west and fly a heading of 293, so I'm going to dial that in first. I think it's the one on the right. Yeah, heading. And you can see the dial moving around the outside. See it. This is the heading thing, and it gives you a little pop-up, so you can actually see a bit more accurately. 293 degrees is the initial heading. Which VOR do we want to tune in? We probably want to tune in Mission Bay, because we're going to make a right turn and intercept 293. So we want Mission Bay on 117.8. The sun is reflecting quite brightly off those. .8, and that was the 293 radio. You can see that that is alive now. We've got information coming from that. 293, and we're currently 3 miles from Mission Bay. So that's just to our northwest. We also need, Oceanside tuned in, so when we pass on the 170, that's when we make the right turn to 318. This is going to be a pretty complicated departure.
And have a beautiful flight.
So once we reach Pebble, that's when we go straight to Santa Catalina. Okay, so it tells us there that that's 39 miles from Mission Bay. So once we hit 39 miles from Mission Bay, then we can go direct to Santa Catalina. So we won't have that tuned in. We'll be tuned in on Oceanside to get these radials here. So 115.3 we'll stick in nav2. Go right, 115.3. And yeah, the nav is off for that, so we'll have to wait until we're airborne to get any signals from there, but that's fine. Luggage is going on. We're about halfway there. We've got most of the passengers on board though. We forgot to tune in the EPR, so I'm going to tune in that now, which is 1.86, and there's a little mirroring function, so it just does it for all of the engines, which is a nice little time saver. 1.86 for all of those engines, and then when we dial down to a climb thrust, we'll set it to 1.58. It doesn't actually restrict the engines in any way, it's just all it does is puts a little triangle there so that you have an idea where to reduce it. The actual EPR is shown above, and there's no FADEC, there's nothing like that. There's no auto throttle even, so you just do it all yourself.
Complete and the aircraft is clear, sir.
That's the boarding complete.
Secure. All passengers are aboard.
We get an indication at the engineer's station that the belly doors and the cabin doors are open. So if I hit Control and C, that should close the belly doors.
The door is locked and secured.
It takes a little while, but that's that done. And then I'm going to close the aft cabin door. And then you can't see it, but I'm going to close the forward cabin door. And that's both of those lights extinguished. Now you can click on them as a test. Most of the lights you can click on as a test. So the pre-start challenge, the parking brake is set, the hydraulic fluid we've checked the hydraulic air and brake pressure. The engine hydraulic pumps, have we done those? Yeah, the engine hydraulic pumps are on. But because the engines are on, they're not actually on, but the switches are on. The oil quantity was fine. Cabin pressurization has been set for flight level 320. The fuel tank selectors. Fuel management is really not simple on this plane. There is a certain way that the tanks are supposed to be configured for takeoff, and throughout all the different stages of the flight. And yeah, I have run out of fuel a couple of times and lost engine. The main thing for now is that the fuel tanks are selected to the main tanks. Fuel quantity we've checked, we've set the bugs for the EPR, the yaw damper is off, the fuel shutoffs are off, the radios are checked, Hox altimeters we've done. I've added a few more things onto the checklist, which is that the INS is in nav. The doors are closed. The jetways are disconnected, which I'll do that now. The gate has a default jetway. No, it doesn't. Got one of those. And the anti-collision lights, I've added that as well. The anti-collision light on. Looked a little bit too bright down here. Yes, we are basically ready to go at this point. We're going to be heading for runway 27, which is along here, so we're going to taxi straight along. I'll try and use GSX for the pushback, but I'm not actually sure where it's going to put me. Because we want to be going all the way back here. So I don't know whether it'll push me all the way back, or whether it'll push me back here and then turn my nose to the right. Yeah, that seems to make more sense. Push back here, then nose right. Well, I think that's what I'll be requesting. Now, engine start on this aircraft is a little bit different because there's no APU. We need to connect a ground air unit, make sure the manifold pressure is enough to start, and then actually start the engines. We need to remove anything that uses excessive electrical power. So, close the exits. Yeah, I already have closed the exit. That to me before. How do we get around it again? Ah, that's it. We just sort of override it. So the reconciliation, the weights and everything are all correct. Tires and light the fires. Okay. This is like my third this is only my third flight, so I am filled with a sort of nervous energy at this point. I think I'm just going to quickly save the sim, and then we'll get the aircraft ready for the pushback. So we need to start the engines on the gate, or at least start one of the engines on the gate. So I'm going to request GSX to do the pushback. I'm going to tell it to turn the nose right, but I'm not actually sure whether that's correct, and I'm going to say yes, I do want to start the engines before pushback. So now we can configure the engineer's panel as we need it for the pushback. So we remove the galley power. The Freon compressors are off, the cabin compressors are off. The recirculating fans
Good
are
day, sir.
off.
Just waiting for some apron traffic while the duck's positioning. Be pushing back in a couple of minutes. Parking brake on, please.
To get the ground truck We can't see it visually, but we can certainly hear it. It's shifting Q. And then look for this dial to start spinning.
Lock in the gear.
Right, so we've got manifold air pressure. We need at least 30 psi. We've got 30. We start the engines in the sequence 3, 4, 2, 1. So we've got the air, we've checked it's 30. For the fuel, we select the main boost pump on. That's boost and feed. The throttles are idle. The starter and ignition switch, which is this one here, starter and ignition, we turn it to armed. We then press the starter for the number 3 engine in, and then we pray. Oh, thank God. It took me about 2 hours the first time I started these engines. We pray that it spins, it does, then we look over to the engineer's panel. Once the once the RPM hits 17, which it's way over 17 now, that's when we introduce the fuel.
Tank is in position, bypass pin is inserted. Apron's now clear, ready to push. Now release parking brakes, please.
That's how you start an engine. Can't really see it because a lot of it's sort of internal, but yeah, that's engine 3 basically started. We should go for a dangerous little walk. Oh, doesn't want me to walk too close to the engines. That probably makes sense. There we go. Just to confirm, engine 3 is definitely spinning compared to engine 2, which is not. Engine 4, sorry, which is not. Probably just going to start the rest of the engines here. Maybe we can leave one of them to start separately. So let's go for engine 4. So I'll select boost and feed. I will pull a knob for engine 4. I'll press it in rather. Keep an eye on the RPM. Once it hits 17, and we've got the fuel. That's engine 4 on the go.
Now release parking brakes, please.
Yep, I'll release them in just a... let's go for engine 2. That's the RPM. Alright, so we should have electrical power going off those 3 engines now. 2, 3 and 4. Yeah, so engine 1 nothing, engine 2, 3 and 4 we've got electrical power. So I'm going to disconnect the air. I'm going to remove the parking brake so that GSX can do its thing.
Engine's clear, start at your discretion.
And then the final engine, engine 1, I'm going to start it using the air pressure from these 3 engines. So the low pressure pneumatic system is what we use. We need to get a pneumatic pressure off those engines. I'll set them all to low, and that's not enough pressure. I'll set them all to high, and that's still not enough pressure because it needs to be 30 psi. You got a warning of increased bird activity. Okay. So what we actually do is advance the throttles until we get 30 psi, and they literally just rev up all the engines until they've got enough air pressure. Set the boost pump on, and then pull the knob, and hopefully that'll push it, and hopefully that'll do it.
Just got handed a note by the crew. They're hungry and they'd like us to turn the galley power on.
Yeah, you can't have the galley power until we get the engine started. That's the problem. Alright, so we've got RPM, so let's get the fuel going. And then I'm just going to immediately pull back on the throttles once we've got a start. Still no fuel flow going into that engine. Why is that? The starter's going, but the fuel isn't actually going in. Oh, there we go. Fuel flow gauge is going. Try getting some more air pressure. Starting.
Push now complete, set parking brake speed.
Ladies and gentlemen,
No,
please pay
it
attention
still hasn't started.
to the
Okay.
features and procedures of the aircraft. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened.
We
and
finished the
your
push, we got the parking brake on.
In case of a drop,
God only knows where the aircraft is actually being pushed to while we were doing all that. Okay, it's where we wanted it to be. It's sort of turned round to
if
the
there is
right.
smoke in the aircraft during any evacuation, the walkway
We still don't have engine 1 started.
which are
This is
located
something that I am still learning.
there. In the case of an extreme emergency landing, you will be instructed to get into the brace position, which is
So we've
executed
got
by
those
placing your
on.
head between your knees with your hands over your head.
We've got
In order
pneumatic
to
air
avoid
pressure coming off
fire
these
aircraft
engines. We've got the
navigation
boost
equipment,
pump
We
on.
ask that you turn off all portable.
Let's try it again. We'll advance the throttles, get the manifold air pressure up.
Thank you for paying attention during this brief presentation.
The beep's fine, that's just the takeoff warning. Pull the knob. RPM increases.
Left is clear, right is clear, disconnecting now, have a good flight. Oh wait.
And then add fuel. That's it. Alright, I'm not sure why that didn't work the first time in the push, but it's working now, so now we can rev back. So the aircraft is running now under its own power. We've got all 4 engines started. So all of these pneumatic pressure switches, we return them to low now. You can like literally end up with too much pressure in the manifold and everything just switches off. You'll lose all of your air conditioning and stuff. That's one of the really cool things about the aircraft. We turn off the arming of the ignition. We turn on the pitot heat. Now we lose the heater in op light. Anti-ice is not required. We can press the generator parallel button, so all of the generators will be running together. Still got an external power light because I guess the little external power cart followed us. I'm going to disconnect that, flick the switch over to battery and then disconnect it. So yeah, that's it, now we're on battery power. That was pretty strange. Galley power we can switch on. Stop the cabin crew from complaining. Check the hydraulics, so engine oil is all fine. It's a little bit lower in engine 3. Oil pressure is fine. Oil temperature is fine. Engine 1 is just warming up. The other ones are all nice and toasty. Vibration is fine. We've got hydraulics applied from each system. That's fine. We want to switch on the cabin compressors, and that's basically the air conditioning that you would have on like a Boeing aircraft. And those reduce the manifold pressure that's available. We've got them running. They're running at a really low level at the minute because there's not very much manifold pressure available. If we advance the throttles, then we get more manifold pressure, and then the cabin compressors can work better. Or we could also advance the low pressure pneumatics, which is basically the bleed, to high, and then we'll get better cabin compression. But if we do that, when we advance the throttles for takeoff, it'll overload and it'll just all shut down. So we just leave those on low. I guess if we were just going to be staying on the ground for a while and needed to cool the cabin, then we could leave those on high. Freon we need, because the cabin temperature is 80 odd degrees at the minute. So we switch the Freon on, and that's going to cool the cabin down nicely. The lights come on to say that there's not enough manifold air pressure to do that. So, okay, let's put those on high. Cool the passengers down a bit. Because we've got a long taxi ahead and there's probably traffic. Just continuing with the checks. So yeah, we've got a flight to do. We've spent all that time setting up the aircraft and we need to actually get the aircraft ready. So flap 10, flap 15, flap 25. This is the flap dial here. Flap 25 is set and checked. We need to test the flight controls. So there's a little thing here which is really for the automatic pilot, but we can use that. Check the ailerons, check the elevators, and check the rudder. All fine. Flight recorder we should set on, but it's not simulated. Cockpit voice recorder, yeah, it's not simulated. And finally we need to set the fuel pumps to feed only, because we don't need them on boost anymore. I'll use my mouse wheel for feed only. On this flight we've got fuel in the centre tank, and I don't have the exact fuel schedule to hand, although I did print it off. But I believe that we set all 4 of the main tanks to fill, and then we set the centre boost tank to boost, and then that means that the fuel will drain out of the centre into the wing tanks. That's my memory of it anyway. Flight number 3. Hopefully I will get better at this. Okay, so over the page, the pre-takeoff challenge. The altimeters are set. Let's just double check that the weather hasn't changed. There we go. San Diego, 10 mile visibility, 299 of 4. And we're set 299 of 4. And the wind is from the west, so everything looks tickety-boo there. The windshield heat, we should now set, well, it says on as required. We can just leave it on warm up because it's not actually required to be on because there's no icing around. Anti-ice as required, that's all switched off. Pitot heat is on. Spoilers are retracted. Are they? Yeah, the spoilers are retracted. The wing flaps are 25, the controls are fine, the trim is fine, the fuel levers are on. The door warning lights are out, the fuel tank selectors are mains, the boost pumps are feed only, the EPR final is set, continuous ignition. This is what we do when we get to the runway, so let's just taxi for now. Yeah, the taxi chart for San Diego, we are here and we're going to go up to Bravo and then straight along right to the very end of the runway, then take off to the west. That couldn't be much simpler. Let's commence the taxi. Parking brake is off. We've lost the little pulley outy thing. We need quite a bit of throttle to get the aircraft to shift since it's heavy. The altitude on the departure would be at or above 14,000, so I'm going to dial this straight up to 320, I think, flight level 320. Since there's nothing actually restricting us. But yeah, this is my only, my third flight as I said, but I have spent quite a bit of time messing around and getting things wrong and having things not work, and all of it's been my own fault. I haven't found any real faults with the aircraft, it's all been me, so we make the right onto Bravo. This is version 2 of Orbex San Diego, so we have got much better frame rates than what we had before. I have the traffic toolbox, and it should let me delete that guy in front of us, just so we don't have to taxi straight through him. It's quite fiddly. There we go. So now you see him, now you don't. Let's continue. think I'll just at this point say hello to the passengers, welcome them on board since we've been busy up to now. We're doing the job of 3 pilots.
This is your first officer speaking. From up in the cockpit, we'd like to welcome everyone on board for our flight. Not anticipating any problems and expect to be arriving on time, but if something comes up, we'll let you know about it. For now, please carefully follow all instructions from your cabin crew, and let's all look forward to a smooth ride. We should be ready for takeoff soon.
So an hour and 20 after the beginning of this video, we're now finally on the move. We've got the warning there for the anti-skid, but I believe that's normal. I think that should be on. We should switch it on as we enter the runway. Switch the transponder on now. Although there is no TCAS. I guess if we were flying on VATSIM or something, at least we know where the switch is. It's here, and these are the dials where we set the number. Air Canada Rouge? Yeah, nice. There's no traffic waiting to take off, which is nice, so I'm going to continue the pre-takeoff challenge. The continuous ignition for the all engines switch goes on. Anti-skid, we can now arm that, and the light has gone out. Continue the taxi, and finally the landing lights. I guess we could have switched them on to taxi, but we didn't. That's it, landing lights are all extended and on. We're nearly at the end of the runway. Next turn off looks to be the end. Just to recap the departure, we take off, turn right to 293 when we hit 170. From Oceanside we turn right to 319, intercept the radial, then at 39 miles we fly to Santa Catalina. Hope that made sense. The flight director is currently flagged at the minute, so the flight director switches down here. And if I just zoom in on that, the modes for it are off. FI, which is the mode that we normally use, and then Vorlock and approach. FI, flight instruments, I guess. So these are the knobs for the autopilot. We've got pitch modes here and heading modes here. At the minute we can set heading select, which causes the flight director arm to move. So at least that one's working. We can't do anything with the pitch modes until we've taken off, so we can't preset a pitch number or anything in. Aircraft coming in here, very low. DC-9. No. 757. Very, very low. So he touched down in the bit of the runway at the beginning that's not really meant to be landed on, I think. That's why he looked like he was so low. Because that is just like a takeoff area, not a landing area. Anywho. Right, so we're lined up. One thing that I forgot to do, which is really important, is when you've put your present position in the INS, you must check it once it's aligned. Check it against waypoint 1 that you're the correct distance. So 0 is your present position, so you should check the distance from 0 to 1 so that you know that the distance from your present position to the first waypoint is correct, as it is between all of the other waypoints. I forgot to do that. The good news is that I made a note before, which is that Santa Catalina waypoint 1 is 73 miles from San Diego. It's showing 74 miles on the display, but we are at the far end of the runway, and the runway is over a mile long, so I'm going to say that we have put in the correct present position. That's something that I'm probably going to need to add to the checklist, because that could have been quite a serious problem. Again, have the sort of nervous jitters as we're about to take off on a manual, sort of manual SID. And it's taken this long getting the aircraft ready. I think we should just go for it. So take off, right hand turn, then on the first officer's side, once we're at a heading of 170 from the nav 2, or actually we can see that on our own side. Once this one here is at 170, then that's when we start the right hand turn to intercept the radial. Once the DME goes up to 39 miles, then we fly direct to Santa Catalina. And we can probably do that on radio navigation, but if not, we can do it on INS navigation. I'm just going to turn the dial around to wind, and that means we'll get wind information once we're airborne. It'll give us a wind direction on the left display and a wind speed on the right, I think it is. We can turn on the radar. It functions as a terrain radar, not a weather radar. It would be a weather radar in the real thing, but it's still nice to have the terrain radar, and we'll hopefully get a nice radar view of Santa Catalina Island as we fly over it. I think we're ready, let's go. The EPR needs to go up to the dial here, the triangle. We're aiming for 1.86. There we go. And now it's just a matter of keeping an eye on the speed notches at the bottom there. That's 80 knots. Damn, we forgot to alert the crew we were going to take off. I'll get penalised for that. 120. And V1. Rotate. Oh, she's heavy. She's heavy. She's heavy. V2. Positive rate of climb gear up. Try and stay just over V2 with the climb attitude. Have a look outside. San Diego Bay. Airport looks really, really nice. Orbex. That whole thing looks really gorgeous actually. Yeah, we should probably get back inside and fly the plane. So we want to make that right hand turn now. God, the aircraft feels so sort of heavy and lazy. Oh, we've gone past we've gone past where we were supposed to turn. Never mind. At 1700 feet, I guess we can start to accelerate. Let's set flap 15. I'm going to start the right hand turn now and pick up the radio. Flap 10. Oops, lost a little bit of height there.
Check the airspeed.
Yeah, flaps up. So we've gone through. we've hit 250 knots there. I am flying this on the stick, so be kind. Right, the VOR needle is active, so I'll start the left hand turn. Oh yeah, we've learnt one thing, we've been a bit too aggressive with the turns there, haven't we? Not to worry. Right, really need to trim up now. That beepers the aircraft trimming up because since we put the flaps up, we're flying really, really fast.
Did you mean to do that?
Yeah, the FO's not very happy with my flying. Sorry, FO. God, I am so bad at this. I'm making a video to stick on YouTube, but not entirely succeeding. I am trying my best. Right, we didn't set climb thrust, which was 1.58. That was why we went over speed so much. We didn't set climb thrust. 1.58. Alright, so we've picked up the VOR, so I'm going to switch heading mode to localize VOR. I'm going to tell the autopilot to maintain current vertical speed and select the autopilot on. So now we should track the VOR and we should maintain our vertical speed. And the current vertical speed is not very high. Let's go for 2,000 feet a minute. We're going to get a really bad score for this flight because we forgot to throttle back for the climb. So we broke the speed limit. We manoeuvred quite badly and the passengers are not going to be happy. Oh, and we forgot to warn the crew that we were about to take off. So yeah, I've got that to look forward to. Hey, that's what makes it good. That's 9,000 feet.
Close to the speed limit. We'll get reported for that.
Yeah, we're going to get reported for that. So throttle is set, the flaps are up. We are just coming up to 10,000 feet. What I should have done as well, there is a facility in FS Captain you can request to break the speed limit, and there's a good chance that they'll give you it. We forgot to do that, but never mind. Right, so that's 10,000 feet. I'm going to turn off the landing lights, retract the landing lights. That's what we didn't do. So the fuel hasn't been transferring from the centre tank, and it's because we didn't change the quantity dial. So there is a quantity dial in the main tanks, and if you dial it below by about 1,000, then that tells the I believe it tells the fuel controller to transfer the fuel. Might have got that wrong, not an expert on the fuel system. That is something that I think I need to read up on before we do this again. So we're at 27 miles now from Santa Catalina. I'll switch the autopilot over to heading select, because now we need to fly direct to Santa Catalina. Sorry, we're flying away from Mission Bay. We need to tune in Santa Catalina to fly there. So that's on 111.4. And the course is 277. There we go. So we can see that we're going to intercept that. Leave the autopilot where it is, and you can actually see the island ahead. That's 38 miles ahead of us now. So on the performance chart, we can probably increase our EPR from where it's at. On the performance chart, we use this temperature here, which is the RAT temperature, so it's just under 20 degrees. So maximum climb thrust at 20 degrees at 6 to 35,000 feet is 1.65. So we can dial the dial up to 1.65, and we can advance the throttle accordingly. We're doing all this manually, that's why it's a bit shaky. I'm going to set the autopilot to VOR lock now. And there we go, we're on our left-hand turn direct to the island. This is where the INS comes in. So if I tell the INS, zoom in on that. If I tell the INS to go from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1, it tells me that the desired track is 291 degrees. True. So this is going to be 291 degrees true, because there's quite a lot of magnetic variation around here. It also tells us that the distance and time, the distance is 29 miles, which that matches up with the DME, and the time at the current speed would be 5 minutes. So at this point we could, if we wanted, and I think I will do that, switch over to INS navigation and just let the INS take us on the rest of the trip. So we switch on INS, we set the head in, we turn the dial around to aux nav, which is the leftmost switch, And there we have it. We're flying on the INS navigation, and there's the island come up on the radar. So we're now at 18,000 feet, and I haven't even done the after takeoff checks because we didn't have time. Climb checks. After takeoff checks, the ignition goes off. Flying this plane is so bloody hectic. The landing lights, I've already done that myself. I retracted it. The transponder is checked. The radio altimeter I need to set to 1500 feet so that we don't have an uncontrolled collision into terrain, as if we're going to do that over the Pacific. Climb checks, the climb airspeed should be about 300 knots, so I'm going to reduce the rate of climb and let the aircraft accelerate a bit. The climb EPR is correct. The de-icing system is not required, it's still 10 degrees. Actually, let's just check the EPR for 10 degrees, and that should be 1.72. So that means we can, as the temperature reduces, it means that we can advance the throttle a bit. We can get 1.72 now. That's done. Seatbelt sign, we'll switch off. No smoking, I'm going to do the same. Let the passengers have a smoke after that terrible departure. And we should also set one of the hydraulic pumps off. And we're on an odd numbered flight, so I'm going to bypass this one. So we fly on the odd numbered pump since it's flight number 3. We'd better check that we've got air pressurization and what have you. That's one thing that I forgot to do. So this is what we've set it to. Cabin altitude is not climbing. The cabin compressors are on. We've got a warning on the manifold air pressure, which is too high. And this is what happened. So before we took off, the cabin was really hot, so I switched the cabin compressors to high, and that meant that we could run the air conditioner, the Freon. We should have switched all of that back before we took off, and that was what I forgot to do. So that is probably something that was on the checks, or maybe I missed it off the checks. But I will write that down so that we won't do that again, because that could have tripped all of the cabin compressors, and then we wouldn't have had altitude control while we take off. So the current, hold on, let me just get this right. The current cabin altitude is about 4,000 feet. This is the PSI differential, and the cabin altitude is not climbing, so that's correct. The cabin altitude should be just under 4,000 feet. Which it is, so that's correct. It reached its altitude quite early on in the climb, I guess. Let's just check that we're not about to stall. No, we're not. We're still climbing. We're at 22,000 feet, so we've got 10,000 to go. We're still flying too slow, so I'm going to reduce the rate of climb some more and let the aircraft accelerate. And we should climb quicker once we get up to the acceleration. We're 5 miles, 4 miles from the Santa Catalina, so now we're starting the left-hand turn on the departure. So you can see that it's changed from 0 to 1 to 1 to 2, and it's 80 miles to waypoint 2. And our desired track is 228, and that's a true track. We're going to turn around roughly to 228. It'll tell us whether we're off the side of the course on here, but it doesn't give us, it doesn't actually turn the navigation course around, so I'll do that myself. I set it to 228, but it's always a little bit out because of the magnetic variation. Yeah, the aim is we want to accelerate to 300 knots, which we're doing now. And I should be able to increase the air rate of climb in a sec, otherwise it'll take forever. outside air temperature is now, I'll just zoom it in so that you can see it a bit better. This is like the total air temperature, which is called RAT in this aircraft, and it's 5 degrees. So on my EPR chart, at 5 degrees, 1.76 we can set the EPR to. So let's set it to 1.76 and give the engines a little more power. Quite sensitive, but there we go. So we've reached 300 knots, so I'm going to increase the rate of climb. Let's try 1,000 feet a minute initially. Increase the range on this radar, goes out to 180 miles. Get a nice view of, when you're sat facing sideways, you get a nice view of the clouds and the planes and stuff flying past. Quite like it, yeah. I think that I should have set the recirculating fans to auto. I did make the mistake once of leaving the recirculating fans to on, and what that does, it shuts down the cabin compressors and then the aircraft altitude climbs. So I did end up with a cabin altitude of about 13,000 feet at one point, thinking what the hell is going on, why is the cabin not compressing? And that was what it was. So I'm going to set them to auto. And then you can see the cabin compressors starting to come back up now. Right, so the aircraft's holding 300 knots at a 1,000 feet a minute climb. We're on INS navigation. We're at 25,000 feet, 25,200, 300, going up to 400. There's still no fuel being transferred out of the centre tank. That's because the dial, so as well as not having the dials set right on here, I haven't actually pulled that lever down. There we go. Now it's draining. Now it's doing it. Okay, so we want to empty that tank out. The next time I do one of these flights, I will definitely make sure to check exactly what we should be doing with the fuel and try and explain it a bit, because it's so complicated. Ask the cabin crew to start the service. So there is some information about fuel on these extended checklists that I've got. So it says that the tank selectors should all be on main, which they are. The crossfeed levers should be normal, which that's not simulated. The number 2 and 3 main fill valve switches should be fill, and the alternate tank boost pumps should be on. So that's the alternate tank boost pumps, so now they're going to fill these main tanks. So if I screw this up, then when we get to Pango, we're going to have an imbalance of fuel and we will flame out the engines. The number 2, so we should have these on until the number 2 and 3 alternate tanks are empty. So the alternate tanks are still quite full at the minute. And then we should return those fill valves and boost pumps to off. So we'll basically leave them as they are until these alternate tanks are empty. the number 1 and 4 main tank fill valve switches on, but we only do that. I shouldn't have done that. These should be closed until the main tanks go below 7,000 pounds. That's going to be quite late on in the cruise, I guess. And it says fuel management: when the center wing center auxiliary tank contains fuel is shown in the aircraft manual, which I've got printed off and I can't find it. So we've lost a bit of speed now. We're at 275 knots, so let's see if we can increase the engine thrust. So we are minus 10 outside at the minute. At minus 10 we can increase the EPR to 1.86, which is roughly back where it was at takeoff. There we go. I'll reduce the rate of climb again. Go back down to 500 feet a minute. So the wind at present is 227 at 30 knots. We can press hold and it tells us that we've got a headwind of 29 knots. That's quite a handy feature as well. This thing looks really basic, but it does have quite a few functions that you can do on it. It's 29,800 feet. So yeah, we're almost at our cruise level. We'll probably never increase the rate of climb beyond 500 feet a minute now. That's probably it. Look in the operator manual. Find a section on fuel. Fuel management. That beepers us arriving at our cruise level of 320. We've got 900 feet to go. The flight plan calls for us to cruise, if I can find it, at Mach 0.80. We need to manually level off the aircraft. It doesn't do that itself. So on the performance data, we can have a look and see what, so for a Mach 0.80 cruise at a weight of, what's our current aircraft weight? We've burnt about 15,000, so we'll weigh about 280,000. So at 280, we want to be flying flight level 320 between 1.67 and 1.77, so that's going to be 1.72 will be our cruise EPR setting. So I've set that down to 1.72. Basically, once we level the aircraft in 200 feet, we'll just keep it where it is, and then once we hit Mach 0.80, we'll set 1.72, and the aircraft, as if by magic, will just hold Mach 0.8. The charts are really accurate and it's really well modelled. That's the vertical, so the way that we hold the aircraft is just to set the vertical speed hold to 0 once we hit the altitude, and that's it. There's nothing fancy to it. It doesn't stop itself, you've just got to do it yourself. There we go. Aircraft pretty much established in the cruise. Quite nose up at the minute, but that's because we're flying a bit slow. We're at Mach 0.72 instead of 0.80. Uh, 112 passengers currently enjoying a drink service. So I think we'll leave it there. Might come back and make a recording of the approach and landing. It should be quite a straightforward landing. It's not very congested airspace out in the middle of the Pacific. So hopefully it'll go a little bit better than the last one did. The arrival into San Diego, which was hectic to say the least. So I'm going to sign off now, have a read about the fuel management while I'm at it. Hopefully be back later on to produce another video of the arrival. Thanks for watching, bye.